I'm really, really excited to introduce. We are going to be having Dr. Ospina with us a little later, but first, I'm actually excited to introduce Annette, who is the associate director of the of Banner Neuro Wellness, which is in Phoenix. And I know Annette, you were wanting to share a little bit about what Banner Neuro Wellness is, and talk a little bit about what you all are up to over there.
Sure, thank you so much. Glad to see all of you. This is a great opportunity. First, I want to tell you a little about Banner Neuro Wellness. We are located in our main location is in Gilbert, and we have another sister location in Sun City. And we do disease-specific exercise in a group setting. So, what we offer are exercise and wellness programs for people with Parkinson's mainly and neurodegenerative movement disorders. So, when anybody comes to us, we do an initial assessment to find out where your strengths and weaknesses lie, and then you're given a variety of classes. We have classes all day, every day, Monday through Friday. So we do power, which many of you are probably familiar with. It's the Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, but we also do things like yoga, dance, speaking groups. We have a fine motor class, we have a cognitive class, and we do support groups. We have a weekly care partner support group, a men's group, a women's group, and our Friday coffee talk, which is an all-inclusive um, support group. So then we also do social events. So we have a very broad array of things that people can get involved with. And the thing that I find is most special about our center is that when you walk in, everybody else has a movement disorder. You're not alone. It's not like walking into a gym where you have to tell people, yeah, I'm just a little unsteady today. No, I'm okay. Yes, just give me a second. This is basically you walk in and say, I'm having a good or a bad day, and that's all the explanation that is needed. Where everybody here is in one stage or another of the same boat. So it's a really pleasant, loving environment, and people develop lifelong friendships, and it's a great place to be. But you also may be aware that we are in a prime location, being in Phoenix, that the World Parkinson's Congress is coming to us this next May. And if you have never been to one of the World Parkinson's Congresses, it is really an event that you should try to get to. So, as that's coming to us, Banner Neuro Wellness wanted to be involved and wanted to see what we could bring to that conference that really would be helpful for the Parkinson's population in general. And what we found for people that attend our program is that many people, before they find us, are left to struggle and deal with Parkinson's on their own. They go to their doctor, they're given a pill and sent home. And we all know that there is much more needed than just going home and trying to manage on your own. So, what we really thought would be very impactful is to compare people that are involved in a program that is all about quality of life, socialization, and also disease-specific exercise compared to people that are managing with just a doctor's visit. So I know that Rebecca entered our QR code if I'm looking for as many people as we can to participate in our survey. And hopefully, what will come out and what we have seen just by our anecdotal interactions with our population is that people that are involved with an all-inclusive program have way better outcomes, higher quality of life, and just a happier and healthier sense of well-being by being involved with a program like ours. So I invite you to take the survey and let us know. What we're hoping is that if the results are what we expect there to be, maybe there would be more inclusion nation worldwide of inclusive programs that would include exercise and wellness for people with Parkinson's.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Annette. And I know Sheila, you asked if there was a Banner Center in Tucson, and Kelly, thank you for posting a couple. There was, one in Gilbert, one in Tucson, and also for posting a link to the survey. Definitely encourage everyone, including those of you who are tuning in afterwards from the I was gonna say from home. You're all tuning in from home, I suppose, but from YouTube, our post program. We'll make sure that I think Kelly, we can put that link to the survey as well in the notes on our YouTube, I think. So we'll make sure that that's in there as well. And also, I'm so glad, Annette, that you shared about WPC being in Phoenix. I really, really hope you all will join. We will be there. We know lots of our friends will be there, and we hope that you will join us this year, or I guess in 26. See, I told you I'm in 26 already. So thank you, Annette, and it's wonderful to have you. And if as you all are watching and listening, if you have additional questions, feel free to. I think there's one question I did want to ask. Somebody asked where they could find your programs. And would you say, Annette, that those two links or just going to the Banner Health website is the best way to find out more about your programs?
Yes, and you can also, if you kind of want to see some of our events, we're also on Facebook. I don't think the banner part is on Facebook. I think it says Neuro Wellness Center, and you can find us there too if you want to check us out.
Awesome. Well, we will grab that link and we will, as Kelly's amazing. She always gets all of those things so quickly and puts them into our chat. Dr. Ospina is here. She
Oh,
has arrived. Hi. Hello, my friend. It's good to see you.
good to see everyone. Thanks,
Um,
Annette, for jumping on.
yes. So Dr. Spina, I've been told that we are talking about social wellness today.
Right, exactly. So social fitness. I mean, so what's the whole reason you go see a doctor? It's not so you can take more pills. It's so that you can be more socially fit. So I think we should start thinking like, as doctors, we always think of just your physical fitness and we're always measuring your cholesterol and your blood pressure. And because that's something that we can measure, then therefore we have a pill for it and we can treat it. But we don't measure your social fitness or your off periods, and therefore it doesn't get addressed in the office visit. So I think that we need to empower patients to become advocates for themselves so that they can have better outcomes. And in Parkinson's disease, because you can't measure off, then people do a very poor job of treating off and making sure that patients are doing well with Parkinson's disease. And unlike migraine patients or MS patients, which are young and still working, and so they're much more aggressive in being advocates for themselves because they're 30 years old, they're raising two kids, they're making sure that the school lunches are done, they're going to work. So if they have a migraine, they can't be like, well, I'm so happy, doctor, that you brought me down from 15 migraines to two a month. I want to get to zero because I have to go to work every day. But a PD patient, 74 years old, and they're retired and they're not getting anybody to school or making a school lunch. And so they're like, oh, if it takes me 2 hours to get dressed in the morning, well, that's okay. It's, I'm getting older. And we really need to be more like a migraine patient and be like, well, why can't I get ready in 20 minutes? Like we have much better, it's the 21st century, and we're still using drugs that came out with the moon landing. And so people are taking Cinemet 8 times a day and taking 2 hours to get ready. And now we've got things like Ambrosia and Apokyn, we've got pumps so that you should be able to lead a full life, even if you're 74, 84, 94 years old. And what do we want to do? Like we want to go out and play pickleball and we want to go see our friends at Rock City Boxing and we want to go to Thanksgiving dinner and not be like, well, I only have 3 hours of on time in me, so I'm not going to go. And so I think that we have to change our mindset and think more of like our social fitness. And that's the whole reason we're taking these drugs so that I can go do the things I love with the people I love. And that's what like things like neuro wellness They bring people together. So you're more likely to go exercise if you have friends at Rock City Boxing and at physical therapy or neuro wellness that are going to miss you if you're not there. And you can do, I know Annette's really good about doing Halloween parties and Christmas parties and birthdays and all of those sorts of things. And so I think that human connection, like that's why we're alive. And that's why we want to live longer for that, not just to live longer to take more Lipitor and cholesterol medicine. So I think it's sort of that. So like to advocate for patients. And I was just giving a talk in Chicago and I was just appalled at like they're still practicing like it's 25 years ago. Their DBS surgery is still awake, it's still staged, it's 6 months to get that patient on. They're not using pumps, they're not using new medicines. They're like, here's Cinemet 6, 7, 8 times a day. And then, like, yeah, if you're a patient in Illinois, you may not know, like there's that you can do DBS asleep, that there's 2 subcutaneous pumps. And so you don't know what you don't know. So I think like we need to be good about doing our homework, seeing what's out there, and that if I need DBS surgery, I can go to Phoenix, Arizona and have great outcomes with great surgeons and not have to be tortured like in a Spanish Inquisition and be awake for 4 hours with a halo on my head. That like people have joined the 21st century. So that's sort of like my little thing of like, we just need to be better advocates for ourselves.
Yeah, and that's definitely a conversation I know that I've heard among the Parkinson's community, especially over the last year or two, that, increasingly. So why don't we maybe kind of go back a little bit and start at because you're talking about social fitness, right? So
Right.
can you define how would you define social fitness and how does it actually help the Parkinson's brain?
Remember, like, what did we learn during COVID? Is that when we socially isolated everybody, PD like went down the tubes. Everybody did poorly. And that's because they weren't going to neuro wellness, they weren't going to physical therapy, they weren't going to rock steady boxing, and they weren't getting together with groups. And we know that loneliness is sort of like a medical thing. It's like smoking 14 cigarettes a day. It's really bad for your health. And loneliness, like then like introvert, like I'm an introvert, like I don't like to be very social. So loneliness means that you miss the social interactions, that it's not that you need a whole bunch, but that you're not getting any of it. And we're social animals, and so we need that to sort of thrive. And we don't do well when we're isolated, especially if we're sick, because we need somebody to come help us and take us to the doctor and help us do groceries and those sorts of things. So the social fitness, so remember what causes neuroplasticity in the brain is not only physical exercise and of that aerobic exercise, but it's that human connection. So interacting with others is what keeps that brain young and healthy. And so that's why it's so important, like places like neuro wellness and where big centers like Banner and their bean counters there's not an Excel spreadsheet that has, social fitness as part of the little grid, in the little squares on the grid, but it's extremely important for patients' physical health. And the whole reason we have them going to doctors and doing physical therapy and taking pills is not to take more pills and do more physical therapy and run on a treadmill, is so that you can go to Thanksgiving and you can go to Christmas and you can fly across the country to see your grandchildren, to have that. What you really miss in life is not more cholesterol medicines.
I mean, I miss that in life for
All
sure.
right.
Um, so there's a term that you used, and for those who have joined us before, I'm sure they have heard this term before, but for those who may be watching afterwards or might be, newer, maybe more newly diagnosed or just newer to finding this information, one of the words you used was neuroplasticity. How do we define that? And why is it important?
Yeah, so what happens in Parkinson's disease? You have these little neurons that make dopamine and they're dying off for whatever reason. And by the time you come and see a neurologist with Parkinson's, you've already lost 60% of those cells that produce dopamine. But that means you still have 40% of those cells. And the longer we can keep those cells living, the slower the progression of the disease. And we know that if patients do aerobic exercise, so they have the one that the heart rate goes up. That makes those little neurons make new connections. And the more connected they are, the more robust and healthy they are, the slower they die off. And guess what also helps neuroplasticity and learning is social cohesive, like being out in public and being with friends and doing things in a social manner, not being isolated in a small little place, in a little box. And that tends to atrophy and shrink the brain. Just like if you don't move around, the muscle's going to shrink and atrophy. So the same thing happens to the brain. And so the brain needs inputs. And part of those inputs in a social animal is to be socially connected. So that's why, we always are talking about physical fitness, but we should be looking at the patient's social fitness. Like, how well are they doing at home? Can they go to neuro wellness? Can they go get their groceries done? Can they go get their hair done? Can they go to the movies? All of those are just as important as are they getting their blood work done and their blood pressure taken for their hypertension.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So the question I have, because as you were talking about, and I was actually sharing with Annette before we all hopped on about that we had done a paper on COVID and loneliness, and I think you were a part of that, Dr. Spina, if I recall.
Mm.
And one of the things I remember finding so interesting about loneliness is that loneliness doesn't just impact you if you don't have people around you, but you could still be lonely being at home, being with, you know, members of your family or your
Right.
roommates or what have you. But that loneliness, right, isn't just about having another person.
Percent, right. So it has to be a partnership and it has to be symbiotic. So there's a give and take, and you're getting some benefit out of that relationship. So that it's symbiotic. It's just not parasitic where it's all from one side and they're sucking all the energy from you.
Mm,
So yes, so you can still be lonely and like be in a household of 15 people if you're not getting your needs met. And then somebody who lives alone is not lonely because they're an introvert and they only need to go and be social once a week or whatever it is. So it all depends. It's sort of like that delta of how much interaction you need. But the important thing is that you have your needs met, so that if I want to go to the movies with friends, I have a friend I can go to the movies with. I can go out to lunch, so that you're still doing the things that you love with the people that you love. So if you like to just paint by yourself, that we make that possible, that the tremors control, the bradykinesis control, of that you can go paint your watercolors, or that you can go grow your roses, or that you can go out with your girlfriends and go to a cruise in Mexico. Uh-huh. And so like today we have much better. So we just had this one of our patients who's on a pump, who's been on a pump for a year now, who's like, oh, I'm kind of like, they forget how much dyskinesia and off time they have because now it's a year later and they forget what the life was like before. And they're like, I hate this pump and it's too big and I don't want to carry it around. And I want to go on a cruise to Mexico with my girlfriends and I don't want to carry this thing around. Well, guess what? It's 2025. We've got lots of different therapies. So you want to be off your pump for 3 days? We can be off Crexont. So like the whole idea is that these therapies are now so much better that we can put you in the driver's seat and we can make you sort of like, how am I going to harness this therapy so that it benefits me and I have control over the therapy and therefore my disease, rather than what we did before is the patient always had to sort of accommodate their lifestyle around the levodopa, around the medication, because we only had immediate release levodopa. Now we have long acting levodopa, we have subcutaneous pumps. And so now we can adapt your therapy to your lifestyle. But many people are still adapting their lifestyle to their therapy. And so we need to be better advocates in the clinic and complain more, be like, hey, doc, why are you still putting me on Cinemet 8 times a day? And that the better medicines you take, the more stuff you're going to be able to do. So if you want to go to Rocksteady Boxing and make it through the whole class, you can do that if you have a long-acting levodopa. If you want to spend 5 hours in your garden with your roses, we can make that possible. We just have to use the better drugs.
hmm Absolutely. And somebody in the chat said that they also noticed that by being social, it also helps them with their voice and speech.
Yeah. So yeah. So that's the thing. Like if you need to talk louder, like if you're just talking to your cat, your dog, like they don't care if it's a little whisper or not. But your other friends, they're also 80 years old. They've got hearing aids. They're like, hey, talk louder. I can't hear you. So plus, but what else do you learn from the other people is all these like tricks about living with Parkinson's disease that the doctor doesn't know. And so it's always good to be with other people who've been through that journey and they've already invented the wheel. So why are you going to have to invent it yourself? Have somebody else teach you how to, invent the wheel, and it's much easier. So I think one of the biggest benefits about social groups and support groups in general is the tricks and that you guys give each other, and then we can learn from you guys, because then you come into the clinic and tell me about all these little hacks which are not in the textbooks.
Yeah, they're definitely not in the textbook, but sometimes I think that maybe they should make a textbook. They're just some of these hacks, right? So
Right.
can you tell us though, Dr. Ospina? So one of the things you talked about, we talked about obviously a little bit about loneliness and neuroplasticity. What is actually happening? So one of the benefits, right, of having social interactions is also when you're learning something new. And I don't know about anybody else. I love learning the new thing. And so I'm curious, what actually happens in your brain when you're learning something new?
So you're making these new pathways. So remember, we're dropping off pathways and networks in Parkinson's disease because we're losing those neurons. So, but then we can use new pathways. So like singing, your voice is hypophonic when you're speaking, but maybe sometimes when you're singing, then the voice is louder, and it uses different pathways so I can remember other things too. So I can make little songs to help with the memory. And so the neuroplasticity is allowing you to bypass. So let's say the I-10 got closed for whatever reason. Now I'm going to make a detour and get to point A from point B with a different mechanism, so a different network. And the neuroplasticity allows you to make those new connections to bypass the part that's broken, that's not working anymore. So that's what learning and memory is. Learning and memory is making new connections. And depending on how strong those connections are, is how quickly you can bring those memories back up and how good they are, or like how. So remember, and when does this happen? This happens during deep sleep. That's why sleep is really important in Parkinson's disease, because all of these things are happening during sleep. So that when you learn something and then you go to sleep, whether it's a motor action, like you're playing the piano or you're learning a new recipe or making pottery, then your brain makes those connections, and it's sort of like what AI does. You make the weights, and that's sort of like it learns new stuff. And then when you wake up, you've got that new neural network and you've learned something new. And that's what happens in sleep. And the other thing that happens during deep sleep is that you're cleaning out all the misfolded proteins, which is alpha-synuclein is one of them, through the lymphatic system. So in the body, we have the lymphatic system, and in the brain, we have the lymphatic system that comes and scoops all that stuff out and cleans it out. And that happens during deep sleep. So that's why sleep is just as important as one of your medicines or therapies, because that's when all the restorative stuff works in the brain. And PD people need a little bit more sleep, because like what happens in PD, you have this misfolded alpha-synuclein, and if it's misfolded, then it doesn't fit correct. So think of it like you're going to make the bed, or you're going to wash the linens, and you're going to fold the laundry, and it's much easier to fold a flat sheet than a fitted sheet. So the flat sheet is the normal alpha-synuclein. I can fold it up and I can put it away, and it's super easy. But a fitted sheet, I can't fold that, and I can't make it work, and it's all bundled up, and then I just throw it and mush it into the drawer. And that's what's happening in PD, and that's what a Lewy body is. The cell can't figure out, it doesn't fit into the little receptacle trash can to take it out into the lymphatic system. And so it kind of bunches it up and throws it into a Lewy body and calls it a day. And so, but we want to help out the brain, that the more sleep it can get, the better it can fold that thing and get it out of the cell.
And so if I were to, learn something one day, learn how to do something, if I were to repeat and, because they talk about repetition in terms of learning something, are you essentially just reinforcing that new neural pathway?
Yeah, so you're reinforcing that new neural pathway. And so that's why patients will notice, like if they stopped their yoga, or they went on vacation for 2 weeks and they didn't go to neuro wellness, they didn't go to yoga, they didn't go to Tai Chi, when they come back, they're like, oh, wow. I can't do the tree pose. I like it. It's hard because you've lost some of that. So that that network starts to degrade. So that the more you practice it, the stronger that connection is. So that's why you want to keep up with your exercise. You want to do it every day, and you don't want to just do it every once in a while because those connections start to break apart.
Now, on the opposite side,
Mhm.
what happens to your brain? Like if I were to just sit in front of my TV or social media reels or whatever, what's happening to
Yeah.
my brain during that time?
Yeah. It's turning into mush. It's just oatmeal in there. So you want to remember, it needs to be interactive. So you can't just get stimulus and like nothing else is happening in there. So it's just like I'm taking my calcium pill and I'm sitting on the couch and watching Netflix. That calcium pill isn't doing anything unless I get up and start to exercise, because then when I start to exercise, the muscles tell the bones to suck up that calcium in my supplement or my diet and deposit it in the bone. But it's the pushing and pulling the muscle does on the bone that actually makes that happen. If I'm just sitting on the couch and popping my calcium pill, I just excrete it in the urine and have super expensive urine. So to do something, it has to be interactive. And so you have so that's why you see the astronauts in the space station. They're all like little hamsters. They're all doing forced exercise because they're on zero gravity. They're getting osteopenia just being in zero gravity. So for them not to lose too much bone loss, they have to take the calcium supplement and they have to get on the little mouse wheel and exercise. So the same thing in humans as far as taking your supplements, exercising. And if you're just getting passive input into the brain and scrolling, doom scrolling, then you're not learning anything and you're just, atrophying those brain networks. And then what the other thing that happens in those, so remember, we want positive inputs into the brain and reinforce positive things. These social algorithms are designed so like think back of like when we were little primates in the savannah and the tiger and the lion were chasing us. So our brain is evolved to respond to negative stimulus and things that are going to be bad for us so that we can get away from them, and so that's what it responds to right away. And so the algorithms have hacked that part of our brain in social media. And so they'll send you things out that they're going to heighten the amygdala and say, hey, this is bad for you. You need to respond. And you respond in a sort of more aggressive manner because it's getting that point of view of like trying to, make you more. So you see why people are becoming so polarized, because it's trying to get a rise out of you because that's what's going to cause social engagement. And then you keep scrolling, that keeps you on there. And so we want to get out of that and not let these algorithms, hijack this most primitive part of, we're just little animals. And that's how these things have hijacked our brains, especially our teenage brains. So that you want to get into more positive things, so that you want to go to do yoga, you want to go to Tai Chi, you want to go to somebody's birthday party, and you want positive influences coming into the brain rather than some algorithm always hijacking, like, look at this other thing, they're going to steal something from you, XYZ, all of that stuff.
And actually, somebody just asked a question that I was wondering about as well. They were asking, what about playing games like Sudoku? Or like, I know some folks really enjoy like puzzles or I don't know, the painting, different
Yeah.
people get into that. It's because even if you're doing that alone, it's still creating neural pathways, right? To,
Right. But so just like you want to have a well-balanced diet, you want to have a well-balanced exercise program and like stimulus program for your brain. So, but if you only do one thing, then if you only do Sudoku, then you're just going to be good at Sudoku and nothing else. So
mm.
that you want to have a well-balanced diet and you want to have lots of everything from like berries to vegetables to some protein on your plate, so that you want to do a little bit of everything so that your brain gets good at everything. But whatever you do, like it's always better to do stuff that you love because you're actually going to go and do that. Like nobody wants to do something they're going to hate to do.
Absolutely. And I had heard somewhere that folks with hearing loss may be more at risk for something like dementia,
For
and
dementia.
I'm guessing it's because of the same type of thing, right? Because you're not having the stimuli or
Right. So there's less stimuli going into the brain. So remember, no stimuli, the brain starts to atrophy. Bad stimuli, where we're only stimulating your amygdala and making you fearful of everything, then you're going to be fearful of everything. That's what the
Mhm.
algorithms do. So that you want to have lots of different kinds of stimuli so that you have a nice, healthy brain. That's nice, plump and juicy. It's, like you want to have like good muscle mass. And you do that by having both resistance training and aerobic training. Mhm.
Mhm. Now, what about if you were to have like talking to somebody on the phone or talking on a like a call like we are talking right now on Zoom? Do are those parts good? Are those parts of good social interaction?
Yeah.
Um,
So anytime you have a give and take, and so like, oh, I have a problem, like you can problem solve together. It's always easier to problem solve something with somebody else to share your ideas and say, does this work or not? And you can solve the problem together. So yeah, that's always a good thing. So that's why therapy works, is that you're not just ruminating with your own brain, getting to a little spiral, doom loop of like everything's horrible, like you're talking to somebody else and the other somebody else says, hey, no, I think the glass is half full, it's not half empty, and you
mhm.
can talk through it. so
What
I,
about something like texting?
so texting that's what, like, one thing I don't like about telemedicine is that I always prefer to have the real patient right in front of me, because you still get more facial expression, you get to see their body language. And so it's texting is better than nothing. The phone is better than nothing. Telemedicine is better than nothing. But always having the patient in the clinic is always ideal. And so I think the more social interaction, and I think that now with remote working, certainly the younger generation has noticed, like, hey, this isn't really beneficial for me. I'm not getting a lot of mentoring. I don't get to, like, hear, like, learn from other people, and I'm kind of too isolated at home. I don't get to meet a lot of people. And so that really the hybrid thing is probably the better thing, so that you only have to commute to work 3 times a week, but you still get that social interaction, and you get to talk to people at the water cooler and come up with different ideas that you wouldn't have if you were just stuck at home talking to your dog. Mhm.
Yeah, I read an article a couple years ago that was talking about how even when you're on Zoom, your brain thinks that it's interpreting other people's like body language well, but we're actually
Mhm.
not interpreting body language well
Right.
in the way that we would in person, that there's other people or there's other things that come into play when you're actually, that your brain is picking up on certain social cues that you actually can't get through something like telemedicine or through,
Right.
texting or something like that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, so meaning that being there's that, part of why it feels different. Like it's still good to have that opportunity to talk through or have some of that feedback. And it is part of helping some of that neuroplasticity, but to your point earlier, it isn't the only thing that
Right.
your brain and
And
body needs.
there's pluses and minuses, because in telemedicine you can actually see a window into their house, and you're like, oh,
Sure.
you've got too many rugs on the floor, like that's why there's all this falling. There's too many things, like we need to open up that kitchen so that you can walk without having freezing of gait. So there's pluses and minuses. But again, it's always like the hybrid model, that you want to have the
Mhm.
best of both worlds. um, so, and I think, I don't know, somehow, and I wish that every clinic could have a social worker, so that we can really fine tune more, like, yeah, I'm adding more Cinemet here, but is it getting the job done? Like, are you going out and doing the things that you want to do, or are we just adding more medicine here? Like,
Mhm.
what's the interaction with your kids and grandkids like? All of
Mhm.
that. Mhm.
And so, sort of similar, because been asking about dementia earlier. In thinking about the, benefits of social connection, I read this other study that care partners of people with dementia are more likely to get dementia themselves. Can you explain what's
Yeah.
happening in that?
So remember what stress does. It wears you. So, like, people who are caregivers to chronic diseases like dementia, Parkinson's, they age in dog years. So what happens to the cells? They divide, and that's how you keep, these cells regenerating as you grow older. But they reach a point where they can't divide anymore, and then that causes the cell to die, and then you get aging. So we get wrinkles, and our collagen stops working, we get gray hair. And so it turns out that cell division is regulated by something called a telomere. And it's sort of, think of it like the little plastic end to your shoelace that keeps it from fraying. But every time the cell divides, you lose a little bit of that telomere.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that chronic stress makes those telomeres shorter. And what makes them longer is social fitness. So the more social support you have, the more robust and healthy those telomeres are, the longer they last, the more cell divisions those cells can have, and the less aging, or not, the slower the aging you have. And so we know that chronic stress makes those telomeres, we use them up faster, and the more social. So we, as an intern, we would know, like, we'd be in the ICU and we could tell, like, who's going to live through this illness and who's not. Like, if you had a lot of family members around your bed, okay, you had a lot of social support, you're going to make it out. If there's nobody there, unlikely that patient's going to make it through whatever illness this is that they got them into the ICU. So again, we want to make those telomeres longer, so that you don't age as quickly and you're not as prone to chronic diseases and sort of inflammatory diseases or stress. So that we know that social fitness helps you with that.
Now, say I'm someone who is maybe in a rural area, I don't have a lot of family around, and you are my doctor. How would you advise me to, if I needed to, if I'm like, hearing that, it's like, oh wow, like I hope I have lots of people around my bed if I'm not doing well. But say I don't have that. So how would you recommend, where would you have them start?
That's where we leverage. Yeah. So like, yeah, we don't like telemedicine, but if that's what we have, that's what we're going to leverage. So like,
Mhm.
if I live in a rural town in Wyoming and there's not a Rock City boxing, but I'm going to find one on YouTube and on Facebook and whatever, and I'm going to go to that virtual class and I'm going to make friends with those people. And so we can still, celebrate a birthday party on FaceTime. So like, if there's nobody around you, then we're going to leverage the technology to find the people around you, and so that you can still have community. So it's not all bad. So we need to see, like, why is this part, the glass is half full. So yeah, so then we would leverage stuff online so that you can still go to yoga classes, you can go to Tai Chi, you can go to Rock City Boxing, and you can make friends and still have that social network, so people can text you, and have that network, even though you're like 200 miles from the nearest big city.
Hmm. And for, say you're, we just had one of our Renew retreats, or our last one of the year, this last weekend. And so we have, where we have we have care partners that, we want to bring them together and to talk through, just give them, just some space of that's just for them, right? So
Right.
with so I have care partners on the brain, since I got to
Uh-huh.
enjoy my time with so many of them. And one of the things I know is really hard is, so say you're a care partner and you're having a hard time because you talked a lot about chronic stress, right? And you talked about
Yeah.
that with potentially, for someone it creates maybe a greater risk for dementias and things like that. So what would you recommend to someone who is feels like they're afraid of leaving their person, for a little bit of time. Maybe they don't have a strong social network, and maybe they're not doing well. What would be the first step you would suggest to them?
So yeah, I think that the caregiver support groups are really key, because you feel like you're the only one. It's like you're the only one going through this. You're the only one getting frustrated. You're the only one getting angry. And when you find out that you're not the only one, that everybody's going through the same thing, and you're not a terrible person for having all of these feelings, then it's a sort of sense of release, and then you can all support each other, because it's extremely difficult to be the caregiver to somebody with like Lewy body dementia who's going through psychosis, hallucinations, and it's not something you can do by yourself. And
Mhm.
so the more support you have, and I think it's super important, not only for like the PD patient who thinks like, oh, I'm the only one feeling like I'm losing my independence and I'm freaking out. But once you go to the support group, you find like, oh, we all went through this. Everybody felt the same way, and that you're the caregiver, and that you get angry and frustrated, and sometimes you yell at your care partner, even though you didn't mean to. But that's normal, and everybody goes through it. And then you figure out different hacks of like how, and then you can like help each other. Okay, like we're gonna, have them all go to the same adult day center, and then we're gonna go grocery shopping or go to the movies or go to the bank or do something that we need to do. And that you can help each other get through all of these very difficult times.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's
especially because I think too when you're caring for someone, one of the things that is easy to do is to forget about caring for yourself,
right.
right? It's the first thing.
And so, and I've definitely had that where the care partner is so involved with the patient and making sure that they're going to all their doctor's appointments and they're going to neuro wellness center, that, hey, guess what? They never went to the doctor, and now they have melanoma, and 3 months later they're dead because it's stage 4.
Mhm.
So, and then who takes care of the patient? So it's very, very important that the caregiver take care of the caregiver, and that you are going to all of your own doctor's appointments and you're getting your cholesterol checked and all of these things. Because if you have a heart attack or you have cancer, then, it's two people that aren't being taken care of. So, and I think people need permission to say, okay, no, today I'm going to do my own things. I'm going to go do my own errands and go to my doctor's appointments, and you can just wait.
Mhm.
Uh, and so you have to sort of navigate that. And the more that you know that other people are navigating the same things, the more permission you can give yourself to be like, okay, this is normal.
Absolutely. And Annette, I want to invite you I loved your comment in the chat about the socializing that you see at Banner when a spouse is in class. And just, I don't know if you have any, like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, has that just happened naturally, organically? Do some of the folks that start to socialize, do they end up hanging out later on? Do you know? Maybe you don't know, but I just thought that
Oh,
was
I
really
do
interesting.
know. It is absolutely wonderful. They're sitting there the same hours because we try to give people a schedule they can depend on. So they're sitting in the lobby with the same people every week. And they've started having a lunch that is totally not put on by Banner or anybody else. They meet for lunch once a month. They pull their chairs into little circles and talk and give each other support and advice. I mean, this is Dr. Ospina can attest. We don't call this a person's disease. We call this a family's disease. It's not one person dealing with it. So, the camaraderie and the support and the, hey, we're all in the same boat that happens during those times is really important.
Absolutely. And just as out of curiosity, this is another question for you, Annette. One of the things that you mentioned when we started, we talked about it would be awesome that maybe hearing more about what Banner is doing with their Neuro Wellness Center, that maybe this type of thing might be offered elsewhere. Do you like how if somebody is in an area and they're like, we don't really have anything, is how would somebody even go about starting or trying to bring something like this, do you think, to their community, a place where they can just come together?
I think maybe starting with a support group. I think that's the easiest. I mean, you don't to get together and support each other, you don't need a whole lot of training. We do disease specific exercise. I think, if somebody wanted to do that, taking one of the power classes with Becky Farley, and seeing if, a gym would buy into that. But I think even just starting with a notice in a local paper or a bulletin, a church bulletin that, hey, we need to get together with, because we all have this same disease process and, it's individual. We're all going to progress differently, but there's some similarities that we can share and support each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for letting me kind of ask you to unmute again to share some of that. I think what Banner's doing with their neuro wellness is awesome. And to your point, Dr. Ospina, having a place where, you can find whether it's just one other person or a few other people as a place to start, it doesn't have to be, a huge to do, just as long as you're finding
Right.
someone, that
Yeah, yeah.
has some sort of shared interest, whether it's Parkinson's and maybe it's not Parkinson's. Maybe there's a shared, or more than Parkinson's, right?
Uh-huh. But that's where you can like find about new stuff. And then Annette has people
Mm-hmm.
come in and talk about clinical trials and new therapies. And
Mm-hmm.
so you can find out like what's new out there. And so
Mm-hmm.
that if it's not being offered to you by your physician, then you can ask about it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And be a
Absolutely.
better informed consumer.
Absolutely. There's so many things that are happening out there. Anything that you're interested in. And I know this may not be for everyone, but I know that there's like a group started that's been started for rock climbing and Parkinson's. And like I said, not for everybody, but
Right.
for some of those daredevils out there
Uh,
that but I think that's awesome. There's something for everyone, right? There's something no matter what you enjoy.
Yeah. But I think that we need to get away from that. So our old thinking about Parkinson's disease, like remember, today we have many much better medicines, and we should be able to keep you in that therapeutic window, that sweet spot, that honeymoon period for a much longer period of time, so that you're not like, "Oh, I have Parkinson's, I can't go rock climbing, I can't do all of these things." No, if we keep you on, like what causes the disability in PD is the motor fluctuations, and of those off periods, if we can eliminate that as much as possible and you're in your sweet spot, you're on all day long,
Hmm.
there's no reason why you can't ride a bike and you can't go, pole walking and you can't go hiking and do all the things that you want to do because you're on. You're not off with your symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And we can now do that for many more periods. Like remember, people like, oh, I had a honeymoon period, and like in 2 or 3 years later, then I had all these fluctuations, and now I have Parkinson's. I can't do anything. But we should be thinking about Parkinson's like we think of type 1 diabetics. I mean, today we never have anybody on a sliding scale insulin with an A1C of 14. That just doesn't happen. We have them on Lantus, a long acting, insulin, and then they're on an insulin pump, and their A1C is below 6. So they're not getting neuropathy and retinopathy and kidney damage. So we should be as aggressive in Parkinson's with your dopamine and be like, let's keep your dopamine on and not fluctuating and like pretty steady so that you can do all the things you want to do and not feel disabled.
Hmm.
But
And
we just need to advocate for ourselves.
well, and I one of the things that you said early on when we were talking about creating the new neural pathways. So somebody's like, yeah, well, now it's been a while because I've been saying I have Parkinson's, I can't do anything.
Yeah,
But
right.
essentially, you're creating a new neuro pathway, even if you might not have done it the same way as you might have 30 years
Right.
ago.
And so we can definitely see, like the pump patients.
Hmm.
So patients that weren't going out fishing with their buddies and doing things because they were worried about wearing off. And so like, oh, I don't, like I can go hiking, but like I'm not going to be able to hike out and I don't want my buddies to have to carry me. So I'm not going to go hike. I'm not going to go hunting.
Hmm.
And so now we're on the pump. Now he's on all of the time. And I'm like, well, how come you're not fishing and like hunting and doing all the stuff that you used to do? And because he still had that PTSD of being on and off with the meds. But
Hmm.
as soon as he started to get more comfortable, like, wow, this body now works 24/7 and I'm not off all of the time and my day is a lot more predictable, then they sort of plug back in. But there was definitely that period of PTSD of like, I still have this Parkinson's body and I'm still going to live my life around every single dose of levodopa. And therefore, if I do that, I don't do anything because I can't plan anything. So I
Hmm.
think that, yeah, we have the neuroplasticity in the brain and also in our thinking. We get stuck in this rut of like, oh, I have
Hmm.
Parkinson's. I can't, it takes me 2 hours to get ready to do anything.
Hmm.
When if we have you plugged in and you're on, like, hey, guess what? This body works.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also like, what is the reference point, right? Even if you're not on, say you're not on the pump or on one of the,
Right.
there's many new therapies, but even if you're not on one of those therapies, it's just what is the reference point that you're referencing back to that's keeping you from? Because it
Right.
sounds like from what you're saying is if we're constantly trying to create those new neuro pathways to bypass the old ones, that you could potentially, it will look different, it will feel different, but there's still potential and possibility. You don't have to stop living your life.
Right. Yeah. So what we want to make your life is more predictable and that you
Hmm.
can do more stuff and you feel comfortable doing more stuff and
Hmm.
that you're not planning every day around every single dose of medication. Because
Hmm.
once you start to do that, then people stop doing stuff.
Hmm. That's awesome. And I'm curious, Dr. Spina, you do a lot of talks for us, you have for a long time. What was it about this social connection and this social fitness that you were like, I would, because I know you had the conversation of like why talk about this now? What is happening? What are you seeing that is like you're like, this is something that we need to make sure we're talking about?
I think what, like now I don't remember what happened in the clinic like 2 or 3 months ago, but I think is that we're like thinking about it the wrong way around, that we're always like micromanaging, your lab work and all of this stuff. And what we need to maximize is your social fitness. And that we need to think of the patient as a much broad, like not just the 15 minutes you're in the clinic and we're looking at your tremor and your gait and balance,
Hmm.
that we want to make sure, well, are you fishing with your buddies? Are you going hunting if that's what something you want to do? Are you
Hmm.
going to go to Thanksgiving or to Christmas and are you get on the plane and go to Disney World with the kids? So that we tend to focus on the wrong things. And then I think what's happening now is that medicine is, it's being bought more by private equity and everybody's being shrunk down to these 15-minute, visits and these RVUs. And so that you don't have time to say like what's going on in your social life and your personal life. And that we need to demand better healthcare and say like, hey, I demand better care. So like just don't refill my Cinemet and shove me out the door after 15 minutes. Like I
Hmm.
still want to do all of these things. So I think that we want the patients to be better at advocating for themselves. So as medicine is shrinking us down into just like you guys are little widgets and they're just going to, have you go through every 15 minutes, say like, hey, I'm not a widget, I'm a human being and this is what I want out of life and I need to be socially fit, not just have my cholesterol, be less than 100 and my A1C be less than 6. Like I need to be happy and be doing the things I want to do. So I think we have to like push back and patients need to advocate more.
And how would you, because this is a question that I thought, it's been a couple of years, but I've heard it a number of different times from folks that I mean, come to all of the talks and are really active in the community. And I realize a lot of folks don't necessarily know, like, what does it actually mean or look like to advocate for yourself with your doctor? Like, how does someone actually approach, like, how do you do that?
So I think if you have a doctor where, like I had a patient the other day at a support group who said, well, I didn't know I could ask a question. So if you don't feel comfortable asking a question in your doctor's visit, you need a new doctor. Get another
Hmm.
doctor. And so do your homework, figure out like, hey, is DBS done asleep anywhere? Is it a much easier procedure anywhere in the country? Then that's where I'm going to go. Like be educated about your disease and then say like, hey, there's all of these new therapies. Why aren't you offering them to me? And if you, that way the doctor has to say, well, I don't think therapy X, Y, and Z is good for you for X, Y, Z reason. Like they have to explain it to you.
Hmm.
So always ask questions, come like write all your questions down on a piece of paper because then you'll forget and they want to shuffle you in and out. And so, wave your little piece of paper and be like, hey, I still have 6 more questions. And don't be afraid to be pushy. Just be more like a migraine patient and demand better care because the system is shrinking you into worse care.
Hmm. 1,000% agree with that. Um,
Uh-huh.
so I actually got a question from someone talking about, and this is a similar, but a little off the beaten path a little bit. But the question was, so they had a co-leader who, um, they were in the hospital. So we're talking like this is not, their MDS or their general neurologist.
Right.
And they didn't administer the medication on time. I'm trying to make sure I say it correctly.
Yeah.
And so one dose they missed, they claimed they had to restock, and then they had to move them to a rehab. And now they're concerned, how do I make sure like that this person is getting their like how do I advocate to make sure that they're getting their medication on time? And so you're talking about advocating for ourselves or for our loved
Yeah,
ones or so what would
yeah.
your suggestion be?
Oh, so my suggestion is like one, so demand that like, hey, this is not, blood pressure, cholesterol medicine. So it doesn't matter. Like if you take your Lipitor 3 hours later, no big whoop. But levodopa, it makes a huge difference if you're 3 hours late. So I tell patients, bring your own medicines and you just stick to your schedule. And if the nurse is a Nazi and says like, oh, I can't do it, then you just do your own schedule and have your caregiver, help you because otherwise no one's going to do it for you. So I'm a bit advocate of like, if they can't get the job done, then you're like, give me the medicine, I'll administer it myself. Or if they're like, oh no, we can't do that hospital policy, then you just keep some cinema in your pocket and get out
I was gonna say I've
as
heard of people
quickly as
saying if
possible.
you're not gonna do it for me, then
Yeah,
I've heard of care partners doing that for their loved ones,
right.
for sure.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we are already at the top of the hour. Um, I don't know if you want to leave us with any final thoughts, either you or Annette. And also we'll make another plug to fill out that survey for Banner, and to send it to others that you know as well if they are not here, please. But do either of you have any last final thoughts for our
Annette, you want to say anything? Or?
Well, I want to just thank you for inviting me. We really believe in quality of life and those social connections that you make by being in a group. And I know we didn't talk about it a lot, but one thing I think that people have a hard time with is if they're drooling or their gait is unsteady, they tend to isolate even if they were a social person. And in an environment where you have like-minded and like-ability people, you're able to be more social without reservation. And I think find a group like that for yourself.
Mhm. That's great advice. Dr.
Yeah.
Spina,
Don't be,
anything?
yeah, don't be afraid to be pushy in the clinic and ask questions. Uh-huh. Because
Yeah.
it's 2025, it's the 21st century. Stop letting them giving you medicine that came out with the moon landing.
I like that advice, Dr. Spina. Be pushy. It is okay to take up space. It is
It's
okay
okay
to
to
ask those
say,
questions. It's okay
yeah,
to make a stink sometimes if you're not getting the care you need.
yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for those who joined us, who are joining us later on via video. I, for those who are on camera, we do often do our goodbye wave and just thank everybody for joining. This is being recorded, so we will see you next time. Thank you, Dr. Espina, and thank you so much, Annette, for joining
Thanks,
us.
thanks a lot.
Bye bye.